Have you ever tried to explain what you feel and realized no one truly understood? Have you ever opened your heart, revealed your most intimate thoughts, only to be met with blank stares, rushed judgments, or advice you never asked for? Welcome to the real world, a place where misunderstanding isn't the exception, it's the rule. Since childhood, we've been taught to shape our words to fit in, to hide what we really think, to wear masks, not to deceive, but to survive. And over time, the performance becomes so constant that we forget a brutal truth. You will never be fully understood, not even by the people who love you the most. And that might sound like a tragedy, but what if I told you that this might be your greatest freedom? Let's start by understanding why this feeling of being misunderstood hits so hard. The human mind is a labyrinth. Thoughts, emotions, memories, traumas, expectations, old wounds, they all mix inside us, forming a unique, subjective reality that can never be fully translated. When we try to explain what we feel, we're using words, limited tools to convey something that is, by nature, unlimited, and so we get frustrated because no one seems to truly understand. But is that their fault? Or is it the illusion that we could ever be fully deciphered? Nietzsche once said, "Every deep love is accompanied by the desire to be understood." But he also knew that this desire is often a trap. The expectation of absolute understanding leads to disappointment, and disappointment feeds resentment. We set impossible standards. We want others to read our souls, to see the world through our eyes, but the other is other. They lived a different life, carried different wounds, speak a different emotional language, and that's when everything begins to fracture. How many times have you felt something real and deep, only to be called dramatic, cold, too much, or not enough? How many times has someone loved you the way they could, but not the way you needed? How many times have you tried to explain yourself and felt like you were speaking a foreign language? How many times have you swallowed your truth because you knew it wouldn't be understood? These moments create a silent kind of loneliness, not from the absence of people, but from the absence of real connection. You're surrounded, yet no one truly sees you. But what if this is an inevitable part of the human experience? What if the pursuit of being understood is an illusion we must slowly let go? Think about it. If no one can fully understand you, then no one can define you. If no one sees the entirety of who you are, then you are free from the prison of their expectations. You are the only faithful interpreter of your own existence. In that sense, being misunderstood isn't a curse, it's liberation. But maybe you're still asking, if no one truly understands me, am I doomed to be alone forever? No, because there's a massive difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is the ache of being misunderstood. Solitude is the freedom of not needing to be understood to feel whole. And this is where many people get lost. They try desperately to explain who they are. They pour their energy into being accepted, validated, welcomed, and in doing so, they become prisoners of other people's approval. But you don't owe the world a perfect translation of yourself. You don't have to fit inside someone else's limited understanding. You are an ocean trying to be poured into a cup and suffering because you overflow. The pain of being misunderstood only exists because you believe you're supposed to be understood, and that belief is the real prison. But what if instead you accepted that each person can only see as far as their own story allows, that everyone has filters, limits, their own demons? To accept that doesn't mean giving up on connection. It means stopping the self-mutilation just to belong. It means knowing that even if no one fully understands your pain, your silence, your choices, they are still valid, still true, still you true. Freedom begins the moment you realize you no longer have to prove anything. You can simply be, and that is powerful. Because the day you stop trying to be understood is the day you begin, for the very first time, to understand yourself. Imagine living without needing to explain every decision, without justifying your silences, without translating your pain into words that will never be enough. Imagine the peace that comes when you let go of the need to be understood. That is true emotional maturity. The realization that you no longer need anyone to validate who you are. For most of our lives, we seek approval. It's almost instinctive. We want our parents to understand us, our friends to accept us, our partners to see us fully. But this pursuit is based on a mistaken idea that we are only real if someone else recognizes us. And if no one recognizes you, do you cease to exist? Of course not. You don't need to be understood to be authentic. In fact, the more authentic you are, the less understood you will be. And here lies the paradox. The people most at peace with themselves are often the least understood. Because authenticity is unsettling, freedom is uncomfortable. Those who don't fit into molds are seen as strange. Nietzsche once said, "Become who you are." But he knew the cost of that. Being your true self often means being misunderstood. It means walking paths few will follow. It means being willing to go without applause. This applies to relationships too. How many times have you stayed silent to avoid being misunderstood? How many times have you shaped yourself to avoid disappointment? How many times have you gone against your will just to be accepted? That is the root of suffering. Denying yourself in exchange for the label of being understood. But that label is just a distorted mirror. It's not worth being accepted for a version of you that isn't real. True connection happens when someone chooses to love you, even without fully understanding you. When presence matters more than explanation. When the silence between two people is more truthful than 1,000 words. But that's only possible when you allow yourself to exist without constantly translating who you are. You are not a textbook. You weren't born with a manual, and no one is obligated nor capable of fully decoding you. In fact, even you are still changing. What made sense yesterday might not make sense tomorrow, which is why it's impossible for anyone to truly comprehend you. You're still discovering yourself. Freedom begins when you trade the need to be understood for the courage to be real, even if that makes you incomprehensible, because deep down, it's better to be an authentic mystery than a clear and shallow character. Society isn't ready for complexity. It prefers archetypes, categories, labels. It prefers you to be predictable, but you are not. You are contradictory, unstable, infinite, and that's beautiful. Being misunderstood can hurt, but living a lie hurts far more. At times, you'll be called selfish for choosing yourself, arrogant for not explaining, cold for refusing to justify every step, but those reactions say more about them than about you. We live in a culture that demands transparency, but isn't ready for the truth. They want you to open up, but only if it doesn't confront them. They want you to be honest, but only if it doesn't shake their beliefs. That's why being true is a revolutionary act. You begin to notice that the discomfort of being misunderstood slowly gives way to an unexpected serenity. Because when you stop trying to explain yourself, something that was suffocated begins to rise. Your inner voice, little by little, it grows stronger, clearer, bolder, and it begins to guide your steps with more confidence than any external approval ever could. You start choosing lighter relationships where constant justification isn't required. You begin enjoying your own company more. You begin to live in a state of internal coherence, even if the world finds it too strange. And then you understand. You no longer need to be understood. You need to be whole. And being whole sometimes means being alone, but it never means being empty. There comes a moment in life when you realize being misunderstood isn't the real problem. The real problem has always been trying to fit into places that had no room for your essence. You are a universe, and universes don't fit into short sentences or rushed labels. The attempt to be understood by everyone is, in truth, an effort to shrink yourself into boxes far too small. But the more you try to fit, the more you mutilate yourself, the more you drift away from who you truly are. This is where something shifts. You begin to honor your complexity, to accept your contradictions, to respect the parts of yourself that don't even make sense to you. And that's okay. Freedom emerges when you give yourself the right to be a mystery, to not have to explain everything, to not reduce your story into digestible summaries. From this new perspective, misunderstanding becomes sacred, because it protects what is most intimate within you. It's the invisible shield that preserves your uniqueness. When no one fully understands your pain, it remains truly yours. When no one completely grasps your love, it stays pure, unshaped by others' interpretations. Misunderstanding is where authenticity breathes, and with that comes a new kind of peace. The peace of no longer needing to convince anyone. The peace of walking lightly, even while carrying a world within. Yes, it takes courage. Courage to be seen as strange. Courage to keep going even without applause. Courage to stay true to yourself, even at the risk of being alone. But this courage gives you something no external validation ever could. Autonomy. You're no longer led by expectations, nor by opinions, nor by shallow interpretations. You become the author of your own narrative, and your story stops being written in public ink and starts being etched with the pen of inner truth. And in this journey, you discover something surprising. When you allow yourself to be misunderstood, people begin to appear. People who, even if they don't fully understand you, deeply respect you. People who don't demand explanations, but offer presence. Who don't try to decipher you, but choose to walk with you through the mystery. This is where the truest connections are born. Not those based on total comprehension, but on unconditional acceptance. And that kind of acceptance is rare. But when it happens, it needs no many words. A single glance is enough. A shared silence says everything. You will never be fully understood. And as strange as it may seem, that's a gift, because it protects you from being flattened, saves you from the constant need to please, and returns to you the chance to simply be. Don't rush to explain yourself. Don't despair when you're not understood. The beauty of who you are is not found in what others can see, but in what you have the courage to keep lit. Even in the darkness of misunderstanding, you are a poem that doesn't need to be interpreted, only lived, felt, respected. Some people will pass through your life like someone reading a book in a foreign language. They'll try to interpret you through their own codes, and inevitably, they'll be wrong. They'll say you're too complicated, too closed off, too intense. But maybe you're just whole, and that scares those who live in fragments. Misunderstanding is the price of not living to please, but it's also the proof that you dared to be real. And being real these days is an act of resistance. You were made to be unique, and the world constantly tries to turn your uniqueness into a product. They push formulas, patterns, ways of being that work better. But none of that is worth it if it costs your essence. To be misunderstood is often a sign that you didn't give in, that you chose to be the author of your journey, not just another character in someone else's story. Of course it will hurt. Of course, on some days, the longing to be fully seen will scream. But in those moments, remember, you are not alone. Everyone who chose to live deeply walked through this same path. And on that path, solitude is not the end. It is the bridge. The bridge between the need for approval and the discovery of your inner freedom. You weren't born to be understood. You were born to be. And being is often indecipherable. But that's exactly what makes you beautiful. rare, and true. So take a deep breath. Let go of the weight of constantly trying to be understood. Give up the exhaustion of reshaping yourself to fit into eyes that can't see your soul. You no longer need to bend, explain, or shrink yourself. The freedom you seek doesn't lie in others understanding you. It lies in finally accepting yourself, whole, imperfect, mysterious, because in the end, not being understood is a sign that you're too alive to be reduced, too complex to be labeled, too human to be confined. And that is beautiful. It's real. It's liberating. You are the only one who needs to recognize yourself. And when that happens, the world may not understand, but at last, you'll be at peace.